Hello again, I'm Patty, the girl with blue energy, and I make videos about mental health. I also have bipolar disorder and ADHD. Today I'm talking about an issue that I think most of us with bipolar and ADHD struggle with, and that is talking too much. I am the literal definition of a chatty patty, and talking too much has been a struggle for me my entire life. And as I've read more on this subject, I've realized that there are a lot of misconceptions about why we talk so much. A lot of people think that we talk so much because we just love to hear ourselves talk. And those misconceptions are extremely hurtful to those of us who struggle with bipolar and ADHD. And that's what motivated me to work on this video. I've done a lot of research and I have information that I don't think you will find anywhere else on the science behind why we talk so much. And I've also written out and practiced and used some really effective tips to help you to stop talking so much. I have broken this up into two videos because there is a lot to cover. So the first one's gonna get into why we talk so much, the science behind it, and I think you'll find that really interesting. And then the second video is going to explain really effective tips on how to stop doing it. After I searched the internet for advice on how to stop talking so much, I found most of it was utterly useless. So I put a lot of work into this, and I think if you actually struggle with talking too much and want to change that part of you, that you will find these videos very useful, informative, and actually helpful. So stay tuned for both parts of this video. I have written a blog post with all the links and science in the post that I'm going to leave a link to in both videos if you want to learn more about how to stop talking so much and kind of the science behind why we do it. First, I want to get into why people think we talk so much and why they're wrong. If you really struggle with talking too much and have people in your life that think that you just talk too much because you don't care, or why can't you just shut up, I encourage you to get them to watch this video so they can understand a little more why people with bipolar disorder and ADHD struggle so much with talking excessively. However, some of the reasons why we talk so much is the same for people who are overtalkers. Our brains are wired differently than people who are introverted or a little more balanced. And I'm going to get a little more into the science a little further along, but why do people think we talk so much? A lot of people think we talk so much because we just get super excited and need to chat about it. Tell everybody what newest thing we're all excited about. Or they think that we're know-it-alls and have to tell you everything we know, or that we like to dominate the conversation, we're like to be the center of attention, or in some way, shape, or form that we're narcissists. And if you've ever had anyone imply that you talk a lot because you don't care about anyone but yourself, or because you're narcissistic, this couldn't be further from the truth. I have research studies in my blog post that elaborate on this, but people that talk a lot are not narcissistic. They don't like to, some of them might like to be the center of attention, but for the most part, those of us who struggle with talking too much, it's not because we just want to be the center of attention. Our brain is different than people who don't talk a lot, or introverted people. Unfortunately, talking too much negatively impacts our lives, and even more unfortunately, finding information on how to stop doing it is nearly impossible. I did find one book that I recommend you read by author Dan Lyons, a self-described talkaholic, and his book is called STFU, The Power of Keeping Your Mouth Shut in an Endlessly Noisy World. I found his book really useful, and he had some practical tips and information in there. He does get a little bit carried away with some of his political opinions, so just tune that part out, because I found him really relatable and the information was useful and applicable to me. However, because I have bipolar and ADHD, I have some other thoughts for those of us who talk too much because of our mental health condition versus just being a talkaholic. So some of the ways that talking too much negatively impacts our lives, it affects our jobs, our relationships, and how we parent. And over talking can cause increased anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and us to be more insecure, which is why I've made this content to help you to stop talking so much, because you can trim that down even if you have ADHD, hyperactivity, and bipolar disorder. A lot of people think when someone talks a lot, particularly when they talk about themselves a lot, that this is because they're narcissistic. But researchers at the University of Arizona actually studied this. And what they found was that when people talk about themselves a lot using personal pronouns like I, me, mine, that it's actually not caused by narcissism, that most of the time it's caused by other factors like anxiety, ADHD, or depression. One of the tips I've read is that those of us who talk so much need to get better at reading social cues. According to a study by behavioral scientists published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science USA, most of us suck at reading social cues. They did some research on conversations between two partners and asked each of them to evaluate when they thought the conversation should end. In 98% of the cases, both individuals thought the conversation went on too long. And in 50% of the conversations, people thought that they should have stopped talking sooner than they did, which implies that we all struggle with reading social cues and talking too much. The author of the study, one of the authors of the study said, if you're not sure when to stop talking, it's better to leave them with less than more. Now for the fascinating science of why we talk so much. I found this interesting, and I think if you struggle with talking too much or have bipolar and ADHD, you'll find this interesting as well. So in Dan Lyon's book, he discussed research from communications biologist Michael Beatty. Michael Beatty is one of the few researchers who have looked into why people talk so much, and he studied the brains of overtalkers. And what he discovered was that people who talk too much have imbalances in their prefrontal cortex. And what he found was that people who talk too much tend to have more neuron activity in the right hemisphere of their prefrontal cortex, whereas people who talk less or are more introverted tend to have more activity in their left prefrontal cortex. What I found interesting is that people with bipolar disorder and ADHD also have abnormalities and imbalances in their prefrontal cortex. Much like people who overtalk, you see abnormalities in the brain scans of people with bipolar disorder and ADHD. People with bipolar disorder, according to two reports that I have linked to in my blog post, have abnormal MRI scans where they have abnormalities in their prefrontal cortex, and where they see people who have manic symptoms, they see the abnormalities or the activity malfunctioning in the right hemisphere compared to the left hemisphere is more associated with depressive symptoms. And not only do bipolar people have issues with their prefrontal cortex, people with ADHD have structural or functional abnormalities in their prefrontal cortex, and particularly in their right hemisphere. So this explains why our brains function differently. We tend to have more stimulation going on in our right hemisphere, which is part of the reason why we talk so much. Now that you know a little bit more about the science behind why we talk so much, I'm sure you want to know how to stop doing it. It's really fascinating to understand what's going on in our brains and kind of have a clearer picture of why we talk so much, but that is only so useful. Most of us who talk too much already know we do it. And if we have ADHD and bipolar, we already know we have mental health issues that might cause us to talk so much. That is not what we want to know. We want to know how to stop doing it. So yes, you can stop talking too much, even if you have ADHD or bipolar disorder. And I'm going to get into some really practical tips on how to stop talking too much in my next video. So you'll want to listen in. And if you're new to my channel, please click the like and subscribe button. I'm really trying to create high quality content for people like us to provide you with information on and support on how to lead a better life, even if you have bipolar and ADHD. So tune in for the next one on how to stop talking too much. I think you'll find it really helpful.